Well, Andrew, first of all, it's so great to finally connect with you. But before we start, I just wanted to let you know that my mom and myself are among Purity's top fans and supporters.
Ah,
So
love it.
I'm truly grateful for your time today. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite some time now. So really
Ah,
excited to
this would be
chat with
fun.
you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Absolutely. And I heard Purity. Do you have an office in Greenville, South Carolina, by any chance?
We do, yeah. It's a small office, but like five or six people go in there. But yeah, we have an office in South Carolina, Greenville. I'm going there next week, in fact.
Really? So Andrew, I happen to reside in Greenville, South Carolina.
Ah,
I moved here about 2 years ago from Boston.
all
So
right.
when Melissa shared that with me right away, I was like, I wonder how far it is. I'm right in the downtown.
Yeah, I'll be there next week, so we'll have to meet up for a coffee or something, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm
Yeah.
not going home, I would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Perfect.
well, awesome. Well, Andrew, so from the little I know about you, my understanding is that you were not always the coffee expert that you are now. So,
Oh.
how did you find yourself in this space? What's the story? Because we all have one, right?
Yeah, so my background couldn't be sort of further from coffee and health. It was I had a software company in Latin America, started in Mexico, and then expanded to five countries in Latin America. So really big sales that would take a year and a half to close, compared to sort of like positioning on a bag of coffee. So it couldn't have been much more different in terms of sort of like skill set and experience.
That resonates with me. I graduated from a business college in Massachusetts, concentrated in finance and economics, and now
Oh,
here I
wow.
am in the health space. So
Yeah.
it's funny. And just for context for you, I started WellnStrong about 3 years
Hmm.
ago. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer back in 2018. So
Yeah.
she was really the catalyst and the inspiration behind my starting it. But I mean, God brought good from something bad, but here I am
Sure.
now, and this is my passion. So and I
Yeah.
know your wife struggled with some health issues too, right? And that was also in part the reason why you started Purity.
That's exactly it. Sorry. That's exactly it. So my wife was having some health issues in terms of sort of low energy. So when I sold the previous company, we took a year off. I thought great timing. We traveled a lot. My wife was getting a lot of energy problems, I think. And so, like a lot of us, she was sort of sort of medicating, drinking a lot of caffeine. And I was a tea drinker, and I really just wasn't focused on coffee. And I thought that she wasn't doing herself any favors, that she was probably giving herself caffeine when her body wanted her to rest. So we sort of argued back and
Right.
forth about the health benefits of coffee. And she sort of forced me to get educated about it. Like if I was going to give her advice about giving up her coffee, she wanted to make sure that that I was educated. So that's sort of how I got down this path.
Wow. And here you are now. And when
Yeah.
did that first start? Was that what, 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
So yeah, that was 8 years, a little bit longer than 8 years, because it started in beginning of 2015, and when I met two professors at the Institute of Coffee Studies in Vanderbilt, and then they were telling me all the health benefits of coffee, but they really couldn't point me in any direction with any company who was making all those decisions based on health. So we spent a couple of years research and development, understanding what was the difference that made the difference? What was the thing that we should actually focus on? And I worked with Adriana Ferrar, Dr. Adriana Ferrar, who's the professor at the University of Brazil in Rio. And she's probably one of the world health experts on coffee and health, or one of the world's experts.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, my mom, Andrew, has always purchased organic coffee prior to the start of Purity, which again has changed our lives.
Yeah.
But I mean, not all coffee is created equal, right? And I mean, many people understand the benefits of consuming organic when it comes to food. In fact, my mom was one of the pioneers who started shopping at Whole Foods back in the early 2000s. But I found that many folks don't necessarily carry over that approach when it comes to coffee.
Yeah.
So, with that, could you touch on why choosing organic is so important, especially when it comes to coffee?
Yeah, and I think organic is one of the sort of starting points. And the reason for that is that if you look at a coffee cherry, it looks a little bit like a grape. And so when it's being sprayed with fertilizers and pesticides and that sort of thing, and it's a very, very heavily treated crop, it's very porous. I mean, it's like, in the sort of Dirty Dozen, they talk about strawberries and grapes and that sort of thing as the thing that you should avoid eating anything apart from organic. Same thing with
Right.
coffee. I mean, you've got a seed. seed that effectively is being sort of fed pesticides and fertilizers and that sort of thing. And most people don't realize it because it's not included in that list of what people think as sort of consumable foods. They
Right.
don't sort of treat it in the same way. But the point I think that's sort of interesting is it has to be organic, but one of the things that organic does is it makes, all fruits and vegetables, not sort of organic. One of the things that pesticides and herbicides do is they make fruits and vegetables look nice, even though
Hmm.
they may not have the same sort of nutrient content. And one of the things that affects the health benefits of coffee is making sure you don't have any primary defects, like health benefits, like, if it's insect damage, if it's got mold, mycotoxins, that sort of thing, that will affect
Yeah.
the health benefits of the coffee. So it has to be organic, and also has to be specialty grade.
Yeah. And speaking of mycotoxins, so again, something not many people think about, but mold can grow in coffee, right? And create something called mycotoxins, which are really not great for our health. So, can you
Yeah.
maybe give an overview to listeners of what that process looks like? Like, how does mold actually form? And then, I don't know, maybe some tips to help them like look out for what to look out for when buying coffee so as to hopefully avoid mold exposure.
Yeah, and as you said, it starts off as mold, but then it morphs into mycotoxins, which is basically they eat the molds. So it's the sort of the mycotoxins eat the mold, and the problem is mold can develop in a lot of stages in the coffee because coffee's grown in the equator. It's very humid. It's often left with the fruit on the way at the side of the road for it to be picked up and that sort of thing. In the picking process, industrial farming, one of the problems is industrial farming is sort of like has a U-shaped tractor that goes between the rows of coffee trees because they're planted that way, and they shake all the trees, and they're shaking the overripe, the underripe cherries at the same time, and the moldy cherries, and then they're trying to sort them out later. And then, as you know, if you just put a moldy strawberry in a vat of fresh strawberries, you come out the next day and it's all
Yep.
moldy. And so you can't ever let mold develop in the first place in any step of the process if you really want to make sure you're 100% sure of avoiding mycotoxins.
Yeah.
But I would say, the one thing you said about consumers and advice and that sort of thing, my pet peeve is this, conversation about mold and mycotoxins because it's so easy to fix. I mean, really, as consumers, we should be asking every coffee company in the world to have a test for mycotoxins to make sure that it's mycotoxin and mold free. I'll just give you an idea, a full container of coffee, that test is probably the cheapest test that we run. That's about $150 for the whole container of coffee. So there's no reason why it's just not certified as mycotoxin and mold free for all of the coffee that we drink. So I just feel like it's just a low bar as consumers. We have to say that's the starting point of coffee and health, organic and then tested for mold and mycotoxins.
Yeah. Can a coffee still be organic but also have mold? Is that
Oh, yes,
possible?
absolutely. And see, that's a bit of the problem. I mean, a bit of the problem is that it doesn't have to use pesticides and herbicides and that sort of thing on the coffee. It can still be organic, but mold can develop completely independently of that,
Yeah.
in the processing of coffee.
That's crazy. And I've heard too, so Purity's roasting process is very unique. Can you
Yeah.
explain, I guess, like how your process differs from essentially other coffee makers on the market?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is that our first lens when we started looking at coffee was we wanted to make every decision based on health. So there's no
Mm,
compromises.
I love that.
We didn't even consider taste as a factor when we first looked at all the decisions we were making, and we didn't consider cost as a factor. We wanted to see what would happen if we made every decision based on health, and that's sort of what we did. And when it came to the roasting of the coffee, you can roast away the antioxidants. So the health benefits don't come from the avoiding the bad stuff in coffee. It doesn't come. The health benefits don't come from organic and mold free. That's a low bar. We should expect that with every coffee. The health benefits come from the antioxidants, the chlorogenic acids, streganoline, some of the lipids on the coffee like cafestol and cawiol. So the really interesting thing is when you design a roast curve, or when you think about turning a green coffee brown and making it taste good, you have one set of criteria. But if you're trying to maximize the antioxidants in the coffee, you roast in such a way with heat and time and temperature temperature and the sort of roaster that you don't create acrylamide in the early stage of roasting, or it's a very low level of acrylamide, and you don't want
Mm.
to over roast the coffee, so you roast away the antioxidants and create a thing called PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which you get from any
Yeah.
burnt food. So we try to find that sweet spot, and we customize a roast for every harvest.
That's so interesting. And speaking of acrylamide, so my mom had actually, she's like, ask Andrew this question because
Hmm.
she's always told me that she read that dark roast coffee is better than light roast when it comes to acrylamide. But
Hmm.
based on Purity's roasting process, would you say that, I mean, both are essentially low in acrylamide, or is dark still slightly better than light from that standpoint?
So dark is better. So this is the sort of like the compromise you make. So dark is better in terms of acrylamide. So there's less
Mm,
acrylamide because acrylamide develops in the early stage of roasting. But the
right.
darker you roast the coffee, the more it's going to create PAHs, and you're going to roast away the antioxidants. So for health
Mm,
benefits, you want the antioxidants. So if you roast it dark, you avoid the acrylamide. So you really want to find that sweet spot in the middle, which is that medium roast. They call it sort of 55 agtron, where you're
right.
keeping most of the antioxidants in the coffee. You're having very low acrylamide and no pHs.
Interesting. Is that what you prefer? Health benefits
Um,
aside, are you a light or dark person?
I like a lighter roast. So, like the
Interesting.
Protect coffee, I drink a lot, and
Had that this morning.
yeah. Okay, good.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great.
What about acidity, Andrew? So I've also read that light roast coffee beans are more acidic and dark roast beans. There's so much nuance, right? So it's like depending
Mhm.
on what you're looking for, then, you're going to choose a different roast. But what about when it comes to acidity?
Acidity is a really funny question. So this is, I feel it's a bit of a misnomer in the sense that our coffee is no more acidic than watermelon, and it's not watermelon that causes the problem. It's the fact that in the case of coffee, it's typically pesticide residue, coffee that is stale, so the lipids like the cafestol and the carriol in the coffee have turned rancid. It can be just sort of like a sensitivity to some of the imperfections that come in coffee. And then people get sort of acid reflux and they say, oh, it must be the acidity in coffee. Everybody is
Right.
marketing to me that I need a low acid coffee. No, you need a really good quality coffee that is,
Yeah.
that is roasted in a way that's not going to cause you upset. And it's
Yeah.
not about the acidity or the pH balance in the coffee.
Interesting. All right, good to
Yeah.
know. And I've heard you also say that you want to make sure that you purchase your coffee when it's roasted only a few days before actually consuming it. What's the major benefit to that?
I think so there's a thing called the rule of 15, which is I mean you can argue whether it's accurate or completely accurate or not, but it's the idea that that roasted coffee is going to last about 15 days from when you open the bag. So you want to get it the sort of the earliest you possibly can, because what you're going to start to see is the problem with coffee is it doesn't visibly stale. You don't look at coffee and you go, "Oh, well, that's three
Right.
months old. It must be stale." But you should treat coffee a little bit like an avocado or an apple, which is when you cut into it, it starts to oxidize. You start to see it oxidize, and that's going to sort of create some of the health issues. So treat it in sort of the same way, which is like 15 days. Since roasting is ideal.
Interesting. So, something I used to do, and I've stopped doing this because if you think about flaxseed, right, they say to get the optimal nutrition, like value from flaxseed, wait until right before you eat it to grind it. And I
Mm.
also realized that that applies to coffee. So, in the past, Andrew, I would just get coffee beans and grind them at like, days ahead of time, thinking I'll have it for the week. It just makes the process easier. But not recognizing that that's not necessarily the greatest decision from that health standpoint. And can you also touch on, why you shouldn't necessarily do that?
Yeah, it's again the sort of rule of 15, like green coffee lasts 15 months, roasted coffee 15 days. But if you grind the coffee, it's fresh for about 15 minutes. So the surface
Wow.
area on the coffee is increasing dramatically. And so the oxidation of the coffee is going to start to increase. And so there is more risk that you're creating sort of the oxidative stress that you're trying to avoid in the first place with
Yeah.
antioxidants.
Interesting. So my mom's been right all these years, and she would always buy whole bean coffee for other
Yeah.
reasons, but the fact that obviously they're better from a nutritional antioxidant standpoint. So then what about people who just buy coffee that's pre-ground in these bags? I mean, you don't necessarily know how long they've been on the shelf. So could you probably say that, I mean, there's really not much antioxidants to pre-ground coffee?
It's funny. We're actually have this conversation going on right now, and we're doing some lab testings to see the how solid the antioxidants are, the CGAs, over time. And so we're trying to do some of that testing. Initially, we were told that it starts to degrade, so the antioxidants start to degrade. Now we've been told from the University of Brazil that the latest studies are coming out is that they're relatively stable. The antioxidants are relatively stable. What's the problem is the lipids around the coffee, the oils that you can have health benefits from, particularly in the liver. The cafestol and the cowrie seem to help a lot in terms of liver.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That must be so fascinating being on the cutting edge of all these studies.
Oh, it's so interesting. It's so interesting that here's something that people do every single day. 164 million Americans wake up and drink a cup of coffee, and there's
Right.
no really healthy version, and nobody seems to be as yet, apart from us, looking at it with this sort of lens. And I just think it's such an interesting first rung of the ladder. There's so many things
Yeah.
that we can do when it comes to coffee and health.
It's so true. I mean, and quite honestly, once you're introduced to like a quality like purity, you don't want to go back because you actually feel like you feel differently, right? And even the other
Yeah,
week, I met a friend for coffee, and it's funny, but not to be one of those people, but I asked, I was like just curious, do you know like where this is sourced from? And obviously they're not, they have to ask the
yeah.
manager or whatnot. But when you have non-organic coffee, you do feel different.
Hmm.
You feel differently, and it's just, but I love with purity those sachets. So that's my go around, Andrews. I'll bring
Yeah,
the coffee sachets to a coffee shop. I'll just ask them for hot water and then dunk it as if it's tea, and it is
yeah.
10 out of 10. So that was ingenious on your part.
It's great. Now, I think one of the things I was going to say is that, we didn't know that people would feel differently as a result of drinking purity. We thought initially maybe this was a little bit like fish oil. We'll make every decision based on health, but people won't necessarily know that one fish oil is better quality than another fish oil. But what we started to see, and now I think in 6 years, we've got 38,000 testimonials, people feel different. And so that was a surprise. We didn't expect that. We didn't even anticipate it. But that's what actually we're starting to see is we're not starting to see, we've seen since the beginning that people feel really good on the coffee.
Right. And aside from an observational standpoint, I've also heard you mention that there's been over 19,000 studies on coffee and health. And I can attest to that because the other day I just typed in, coffee and health benefits on PubMed, and so many things came up. And this could be
That's
an
insane.
episode dedicated to itself. But could you touch on maybe a few of the most interesting findings that you've come across when it comes to coffee for overall health, or even specifically on certain organs?
Yeah, I'd say the first one for me is liver health. So Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, who's on our advisory board, I reached out to him about 6 years ago, and as a liver surgeon, he's just been a big proponent of people drinking coffee for liver health. He says it's the number one thing you can do to protect your liver if you drink alcohol. So it's very impactful. But what's most impactful about it is that the studies show that for every cup of coffee you drink from the baseline. So, for example, let's say you drink one cup of coffee, you have a 20% lower chance of ever developing fatty liver, liver cirrhosis, or end stage liver disease. But you add another cup of coffee, you have a 40% lower chance. 3 cups of coffee, 60% lower chance. So, I mean, what's shocking to me is, that just the number, you think of the number of people who consume alcohol and they don't understand the impact that coffee should be having. And instead they reach
Right.
for a soda. That's not going to have the same health benefits because obviously it doesn't come from the caffeine. It comes from the chlorogenic acids. So I'd say
Yeah.
liver is something I'm really interested in, and also the prevention of type 2 diabetes. There's some
Mm-hmm.
very large studies that have been done. I think the nurses study is one where the nurses, I think it's 1.2 million people tracked over 25 years, show that if you drink between 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day, you have a 45% lower chance of ever developing type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
And
That's
a third of
incredible.
our healthcare dollars, 250 million plus, is spent on 250 billion plus is
Yeah.
spent on prevention of type 2 diabetes and treatment of diabetes. So I mean, if people just understood that they should drop the soda and start drinking coffee and good quality coffee instead, it could be something that have a real impact on healthcare costs.
That's incredibly fascinating. And even too, I mean, I've heard a lot of research on the benefits of coffee consumption, for, even for just like longevity. I mean, there's a lot right now. Longevity research is a really hot area.
Yeah, it's a 16% that they track these people over a 10-year period. And if you were a coffee drinker, there was a 16% increase in probability you would live through that period of time. So I mean, it's not that you know, obviously everyone is going to have die
Right.
eventually, but but if you're a coffee drinker, you're going to survive longer, which is, I think, incredible.
Yeah, survive longer and feel better. That's the goal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
how many cups do you drink a day?
I tried to work that out the other day. Probably more like six.
Yeah. You,
Yeah,
you must be a fast metabolizer of caffeine then.
that is the trick. It's like I'm a very fast metabolizer of caffeine. I can have a double espresso just before I go to sleep, and I sleep like a
Wow.
baby. A lot of people, you know, they have a coffee at 12 o'clock, and you know they're up all night, sort of thing. So
That's
that
incredible.
helps.
Part of me
Yeah,
too wonders like how much is that like what you're born with, like how your body actually works versus how much of it is a cultural thing. Because even like I studied abroad in Florence, and I'll never
yeah,
forget my grandma's brother would always drink espresso at 10 o'clock at night. And here I am. If I just had a spoon of that, I would be up until 4 or 5
yeah,
o'clock in the morning. So I always
yeah,
wondered that. I was like, is it just a way of life? Maybe his body's used to it, or is he just a fast metabolizer of caffeine? But I can't do more than 2 cups
yeah.
before like yeah, 2 cups is my limit. And then if I have any type of caffeine after 11 in the morning, it will disrupt my sleep. And I've been actually tracking that because I recently got an Aura ring, which has been fun to experiment with.
Ah, me
But
too.
oh, see, there you go.
I have the
Do you
aura
like
and
it?
the whoop. Yeah,
Really?
it's great.
I haven't heard of the Whoop. What is that?
Same sort of thing, same sort of tracking device. It measures a few different things, but I wanted to see if there was any sort of source of truth between the aura and the whoop. Like in other words, I
Oh,
would have a bad night's
interesting.
sleep and see what the
Yeah.
impact was. So I'm very much into measurements, you know,
What have
and
your findings been so far?
I don't have much deep sleep. I don't sleep very well. I think that's probably my findings. But if I exercise, I think that's the one thing that seems to have the biggest impact on my you know
Yeah.
sort of my rhythm, my ability to sleep well. So I mean, just avoiding if I miss an exercise session, then I think that has a big impact. Unfortunately,
Interesting. Well, it
yeah.
could also be because your mind is just constantly working on this new Cool Farms initiative, which I recently
Oh,
heard about and I am beyond excited about. I was telling Melissa the other day, I saw this incredible video you put together. I'm going to link it in the show notes, but could you share a bit more on what that is and everything about it? I mean, you spoke so much about how like industrial farms harm the environment and how this new initiative is going to benefit coffee farmers, and it's incredible. So I'd love for you to just share a bit more about that project.
yeah, and I'm really excited about it as well. I mean, it's a bit of a journey from, so when we started, we wanted to make every decision based on health. We knew it was the antioxidants that made a difference. So we lab tested coffee really from around the world for the highest in antioxidants. And part of this journey is we started to recognize maybe about 3 years ago that the coffee that we were typically buying that was the highest in antioxidants happened to be grown in biodynamic regenerative farms, regenerative organic farms. So we lab tested our coffee. This isn't sort of guesswork. I mean, we've got 6 years, 7 years worth of data about which coffee is the highest level of antioxidants and nutrients that we care about for health. And then we've started to recognize that the coffee that's really good for health is grown in soils that are just vibrant, rich soils, and it's not industrial farming. So
Yeah.
industrial farming causes imperfection in the coffee, but it also causes problems with the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. And so, what we started to do, and we started off about 2.5 years ago, we invested in our first farm in Colombia called Monte Bonito.
Wow.
We wanted to do that because we wanted to make every decision based on health on a farm level, on a cultivar level, on a soil level. And we knew that the farmers weren't necessarily motivated to do this because nobody was paying a premium for coffee for health. So we
Mm.
made that investment. We started doing lots of experimentation in terms of cultivar, but also things like biochar, biosequesters, like basically the way to
Wow.
sequester methane, from the fruit. How do we farm in a way that's environmentally friendly and also farm in a way that maximizes the antioxidants in the coffee? And so the Core Farm Initiative is basically an alliance that we've put together with farmers. So what we do is we find a farm that reaches our criteria, which has the very high sort of standards that we're looking for, and then we commit to buying all of their crop for the next 2 to 3 years. So that gives the
Wow.
farmer certainty and allows us through micro lending to invest in those farms to get them up to a higher level. So we're trying to get these 6 farms that we work with right now all to even a higher level than they already are at,
Wow.
by lending them money to make this sort of like investments that they need to make on the farm.
That's incredible. I'm in awe of you. I mean, just the diligence that it must have taken to learn about the process for all of that when it comes to testing. Like, how did you even go about doing that?
I actually think it's sort of one of the advantages that we had is that I came at this with a clean sheet of paper. I had no vested
Yeah.
interest. I didn't come from the coffee industry. So it was really just curiosity. It was just really sort of trying to learn as much as I could. And I had some amazing people who were helping me, starting with Adriana Farrar, who sort of educated me for 18 months on every part of the production process in coffee and how those things relate to coffee and health. So really good guides.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Once
Yeah.
you should write a book at some point, Andrew, just on like your whole process. Maybe 10 years or so. I'll be the first to promote it and read it, but it's truly incredible. It really is.
Thank you. Yeah.
And also too, so I understand that you just essentially said you're not driven by region when it comes to selecting coffee, but rather like the soil quality. Have you found that Colombian soil tends to be the most rich in terms of, I don't know, other areas that you've explored?
I like Colombian coffee. We've 3 of our 6 farms are from Colombia. I like it because of the taste profile, but I also like it in terms of it's where we've consistently found the highest chlorogenic acids and the compounds that we care about. So, I mean, I don't know how much of that is just coincidence, but I think I think it's a very good region for us to look at, and so is Honduras and Nicaragua, and there's a number of volcanic soil seems to make a big difference as well.
Interesting. My
Mhm.
my freshman year roommate in college, so 28% of my undergraduate population was international, and my
Oh, wow.
freshman year roommate was from Honduras and her father actually owned a coffee plantation. So I was
Oh,
privy to kind of some of the inner workings of that. Nowhere near as in depth of what purity does, but it was interesting to learn about.
yeah.
Um and Andrew, going back to coffee taste. So I feel like many people, at least most of my friends from what I've observed, are used to this like burnt taste when it comes to drinking coffee. What should a good cup of coffee actually taste like?
I mean, for me, it's the burnt taste is a little bit of a disguise. So, the big sort of coffee chains around the world, they have a problem, which is that they want the coffee in Singapore to taste like the coffee in Seattle. And so it's an organic product. And so how do they do that? The very best way to do that is to dark roast it. It roasts away most of the impurities, meaning like you don't notice the impurities. Obviously, they're still there. And you have this sort of acrid, like, the face scrunch sort
Yeah.
of first sip of coffee look. And that's really just because they want to create consistency with the coffee. It's an organic product. You should be able to taste all the subtle differences and the different fruits and in that coffee. There's just
Yeah.
so much variety, but it has to be a good quality coffee for it to stand up to its you having to taste the quality of that coffee, or the detail in the coffee. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
the taste profiles and purities are very distinct. Like you can
Yeah.
clearly taste what it is, which I absolutely love. I'm wondering, is there such a thing as a coffee tester, like similar to wine testing with
Yeah,
hints
sure.
of certain notes? Like, are there coffee testers? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. Ildi Revi, who's our head of coffee and has been with us since the beginning, she's actually an instructor for Q graders, and Q graders are almost like the sommeliers of coffee. And so she's one of
Wow.
the instructors that calibrates those Q graders. So
Interesting. That's
yeah,
incredible. Well, if you're looking for anyone to have on that board, I'm happy to volunteer
yeah,
and learn about that process because I think that's awesome.
yeah. Well, since you're in
And
Greenville, you have to
while
come
I
for a
do
tasting.
enjoy the yeah, oh my gosh, Andrew, I would love
Hmm.
that. Let me know. I think your office, I actually just looked it up. It's about 15 minutes from downtown. So, you'll be
Fabulous.
seeing me pretty frequently.
Great. Good. Excellent.
And also too, Andrew, so while I do enjoy the occasional iced coffee, I did also hear that hot coffee was found to have higher antioxidant levels. Is that true?
No.
Good. I'm glad.
No.
I'm so glad to hear that.
No, the extraction method. So if you cold brew coffee, so if you're extracting it through, let's say, a 24-hour cold brew, you're actually going to get more antioxidants from the coffee. So the extraction process is better.
Interesting.
Um, Hot coffee, it's all about the extraction. It's that heat extracts, pressure extracts, cold water extracts, which is going to extract the best way. And the big thing that makes the difference is the quality of coffee, less to do with the way you prepare it. In fact, we try and encourage people just to drink more coffee. It's just, drink more
Yeah.
better quality coffee, however you like it. If you like cold brew, if you like, hot frappuccinos, I mean, anything that minimizes the amount of sugar and cream, obviously. But if you can drink
Right.
it black, fabulous.
Yeah. And I am curious too, Andrew. So I feel like this is also a whole other area of not contention, but a lot of people have different views on how to actually like what is the healthiest way to brew coffee. And I think sadly too, I mean a lot of coffee makers now are made with plastic and it's very challenging to find
Yeah.
stainless steel, like pure stainless steel coffee makers. So I'm just curious, like what how do you make your coffee? Do you use a pour over? Do you use a French press? Do you
Typically, I like the sort of process in the morning of using a Chemex and just, it's a paper filter. And I also like French press. It just, it really depends. But that's my standard is sort of a pour over that I like.
okay.
I
Noted.
typically have lots of coffees to try. So that's a good way
I'm
of doing
sure you're
it.
not lacking. Do you
Yeah.
have any additions that you include in your coffee? So we hear a lot too about the benefits of MCT oil. I mean, to be honest, I will add that occasionally, but it does change the texture and taste of the coffee. And I know it's not for everyone, but I don't know. Do you have any
Yeah.
other additions like collagen or do you just drink it black?
I just drink it black. I mean, honestly, and I think it's important that if people will drink more coffee as a result of putting MCT oil or other things in there, they should make their own sort of formula that works for them with good quality coffee. What we decided to do was stop where any other thing began. So in other words, we're stopping just at coffee. So we're making every decision based on health for the coffee, but that's our lane. We want to stop there. We're not going to ever add anything to coffee. We're not going to do anything different or funky with it. We're just going to provide the highest quality coffee for health that we can
Yeah.
roast.
That's incredible. Well, truly, I mean, your mission shines through in every single aspect of the coffee. I've read that you even nitrogen flush the
Hmm.
bags. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you want an inert gas so that it doesn't start to stale until you open the bag. So one of the problems with store-bought coffee is that it's staling as it's sitting on the shelf. And so that
Yeah.
has its health problems. And that was one of the first considerations. There's a lot of things that we did in the early days because health directed us that way in terms of like what's the healthiest version that closed certain doors to us, like retail, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was more important that we were consistent with what our mission was and what we were trying to do. So nitrogen flushing was one of those examples where we really needed to make sure that the coffee was fresh.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
explains I'll bring a bag of purity home to my mom sometimes and I fly home. And by the time I land, the bag is just like, it's about
Yeah,
to explode.
yeah, that's
But
right.
it's fresh. It is very
Yeah,
fresh.
that's part of the problem. I mean, the coffee will off gas and provide CO2, and so that release valve is meant to let that sort of air pressure out. But you don't find that in stale coffees. You don't find the
Yeah.
bag expanding to that point because, there is no off-gassing. But if a coffee has just been roasted, there's certain things to look for. I mean, one is the sort of like that bag swelling. And the second one is when you grind the coffee and you put it in a paper filter, look for
Yeah.
almost like it's almost like soap bubbles where you can see that it's like a rainbow color. You can see the oils and the lipids on the coffee giving off that sort of look when the coffee
Interesting.
starts to bloom.
Wow. So
Yeah.
fascinating. Coffee's
Yeah.
incredible. Aside from the Cool Farms initiative, are there any other upcoming developments with Purity?
I think the biggest one is the cool farms. I mean, for us, it's just that, I mean, there's lots of directions we could go in. There's lots of directions that I would encourage
So
people to go
many.
into. But for us, it's about farming in a way that's good for the environment, good for the farmers, that ends up with a product that is good for the consumers. And so we want to sort of like shine a light on the fact that great coffee for health is grown in a way that's good for the environment. And what we're focusing on now is the idea of carbon sequestration. So the farmers
Yeah.
who farm coffee in a way that is good for the environment, they take carbon from the atmosphere and put it down into the soil where it belongs. And so I
It's
think that's a
incredible.
very important initiative that we just want to dig deep into.
No, I couldn't agree more. Do you travel often, Andrew, to those actual farm locations
Oh, all the time, all the
all the
time. In
time?
fact, I
That
just got
must be an
back from.
experience.
Oh, it's amazing. And what we're doing now is we're bringing all of our farmers. So the six farmers are going with us to all of the farm locations. So we did
Wow.
Nicaragua and Colombia. We're going to Brazil in a few months. And the idea is what we're trying to do is share best practices. So let's say Mousy in Nicaragua can look at a farm in Colombia with like Oscar and say, okay, I love what you're doing with biochar here or biodigester or what you're doing just in terms of different sort of cultivars of the coffee, and we're sharing best practices so we can all move up to a higher standard.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm sure you're familiar with Kona coffee.
Yeah.
So back in, I don't know, 2018 or so, I went to Hawaii because I had this idea of like basically creating some type of product with coffee fruit because we know it's discarded and not many people really use it. And I
Yeah.
read up on the health benefits of coffee fruit. I mean, it's incredibly rich in antioxidants. There's people that make like skin cream from it. There's drinks with it. There's obviously like coffee, coffee cherries like drinks and whatnot.
Hmm.
So I had went and basically was just able to go visit coffee farms in Kona and see
Right.
the whole process. So I'm just imagining you going to these farms and like that. Yeah. Wow. That must be truly incredible.
So we have done a part. So part of what you're talking about is what we call the Cool Farms layer cake. And so the layer cake is the idea that in order for farmers to have the money to move to organic regenerative agriculture and to do all the changes that we would like them to do. So one is micro lending, but two is we want to give them access to different lines of income. So what we're doing is actually
Yeah.
working with providing a tea, which is from the leaves, the flour, and the cascara, which is the pulp of the coffee. So it's all these different layers of income. So, and I think that's a really interesting area, but it's sort of like in its very early stage because food safety is very important. I mean, in terms of picking and then drying and making sure that
Yeah.
the tea that's created is food safe.
Absolutely. And I've also heard that, I mean, just getting the organic certification is incredibly expensive, such that
Yeah.
many farmers, even if they do grow quote unquote organic coffee, like they just can't afford to get that certification.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a bit of the problem that we've got in the industry. So, as Purity, we decided that we wanted to make sure that we're working with farms who had those levels of certification. But my wife is
Yeah.
starting a coffee company called Sacred Cups, which is the idea of how she can get indigenous tribes who really are selling their coffee to a middleman. So, this broker is basically taking a lot of the profits and is not adding any value. But what they're doing is if one farmer is doing a great job and then their neighbor is doing a poor job, it's all put in one vat of coffee and then it's sold at commodity pricing. So what she's
Right.
doing is trying to create awareness for these indigenous tribes in the Amazon who are doing a great job producing the coffee and then selling it directly to the consumer. But
Wow.
it is a problem in the industry. Yeah.
That's incredible. And see, that's another thing I love about Purity is there's just so much social good done through this process, right? And like that's why it's grown so much and that's why it's been blessed so much. But
Yeah.
truly incredible, Andrew. I'm just so grateful for everything that you're doing. I told Melissa, I was like, let me know how else I could ever help
Oh,
support.
that's
I'd
great.
really love to stay in touch with you regarding this Cool Farms initiative as well. But yeah, I'm
Great.
just your number one fan and can't wait to see what else
Love
is to
that.
come.
Yeah, that's great. I really
Awesome.
appreciate that.
Absolutely,
Excellent.
Andrew. So, where can listeners learn more about Purity? I certainly will include the links to the site in the show notes as well as that video. But any other things you'd like to mention?
The video is a great start. In fact, you're probably one of the first people that have seen the video. It came out just like 2 or 3 days ago. We're talking about how we circulate that. That will give you an idea, or the listeners an idea about what we're trying to do and why we think it's important. There's going to be a lot more information on our site, and then we're doing a YouTube channel as well, so that we can start telling this story. And what we're trying to do is create a community of coffee and health. So we're having some really good conversations with people who are experts, agronomists, who are farmers, who are scientists. I mean, the more we can sort of collaborate with a wider audience, and the less we do this by ourselves or try to do this by
Right.
ourselves, the more successful we'll be.
Wonderful. Sounds great. Well, I'm looking forward to the book coming out in 10 years or so. So
That's
I'll
right.
have you back up before then, though. But my last question for you, Andrew, is what does being well and strong mean to you?
I think it's a balance for me. Honestly, I think, it's about for me it's meditation. It's sort of really focused on I my wife and I often do this thing called the gap and the gain. And so the idea is we set goals, but we look
Yeah,
backwards and we measure the gain that we've come. And that's is a big psychological sort of hack for us, in terms of we start to recognize just how far we've moved, rather than the gap of where we're trying to get to, sort of thing. So I
I
think
love
everything
that.
from meditation, eating right, exercise, it just seems to be this holistic, a holistic approach.
Yeah, we have very, very similar approaches, it sounds like. Just curious, what are you reading right now? So, The Gap and the Gain is actually a book that it actually just came in yesterday. I did order it. But I'm always into inspirational, motivational books, and I always like to ask.
I'm just thinking, the book I'm reading right now, and I'm not sure if it would apply. It's not health related. It's called Crossing the Chasm, and it comes
That's a
from
great
cross.
one.
Yeah. And because I come from a technology background and I haven't read it for a
Right.
long time, and I started realizing, well, maybe coffee's going through the same evolution. We've got these really early adapters, the people who are just the sort of evangelists, and later on we need to know how we're going to get that sort of middle of the bell curve, where this becomes more mainstream.
Yeah, no, I love that. I actually had to read that freshman year of
No,
college. As I said, my college was in for entrepreneurship, and they really instilled in us like
no, that's
you need to
great.
have a strong marketing, finance background if you want to start, obviously, a business. But I certainly have learned a lot just from doing it on my own in the past few years, and I
Yeah,
think experience is the best teacher. Well, anyway, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to share this with listeners, and yeah, just
fantastic.
continue to share more about purity and your mission and I look forward to meeting you. I mean, you're going to hopefully be in
Absolutely.
Greenville a few more times, so we'll connect.
Likewise, yeah, absolutely. Just reach out to Melissa, and if it works with your plans, let's meet up for a coffee. And if not, next time, that would be great.
Wonderful. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Andrew.
Thank you. Bye.